Cowboys. Now, I do want to backtrack a little further. When I had, you guys know I started a website back in the day, a fledgling sports website, a blog at the time. And I was still working my job at a magazine. I worked at this magazine, Us Weekly. So fun. Great job in New York City. I was living the dream, baby. But I saw an opportunity with the website, so I had quit the job, and I was doing the website full time. And I'll never forget, the wife and I quit like right before winter break, so I could like have a little fun over winter break. And the wife and I started watching this show called The Office. You know, this was at the time of like DVDs or whatever. So I think we downloaded or bought the entire first 4 seasons of The Office. And we get really into the show. It stars Steve Carell. And there's a gentleman on that show named Andy Bernard who went to Cornell, if you watch the show. And he had an incredible line that has stuck with me until today. I want to get it exactly right. I wish there was a way to know when you're in the good old days before you've actually left them. Okay? Let that sink in for a moment. And now let's turn to the Dallas Cowboys, who have won 12 games each of the last 3 seasons. Those were the good old days. They're gone. It's over. This team is disintegrating as we watch it week by week this offseason. Between Jerry Jones and his "we're going all in" nonsense, followed up by crickets in free agency, mediocre moves in the draft, a quarterback who's looking to get paid, a coach who's looking for a contract and is fed up with the owner, a wide receiver in CeeDee Lamb who wants to get paid and is now threatening, I ain't going to camp if I don't have a new deal. And then we've got the latest bomb, which dropped over the weekend. It's defense on defense crime, okay? You guys know Malik Hooker, former Ohio State defensive back, won a chip with the Buckeyes. Very talented player. He came on the same year that the Cowboys drafted Micah Parsons. And Malik Hooker went on Keyshawn Johnson's podcast, All Facts, No Breaks. And here's what he had to say about defensive star Micah Parsons.
My advice would be for Micah would be, you know, just make sure we're all right, you know, and being where your feet are. Because if we're out working, you know, the run game's terrible, but you're doing a podcast every week and you know the run game is terrible, then, you know, what are you really caring about? Are you caring about the crowd that, you know, is watching your podcast? Are you caring about the success of our team and the Super Bowl that we're trying to reach?
Oh, boy. Of course, Micah Parsons didn't take long for him to see this, and he then replies on social media, "Bro, you're my locker mate. Why don't you tell me this instead of go announce it on a podcast?" And that's where it gets interesting, because it's like, okay, Malik Hooker's a veteran. Well, why would he do this? Why wouldn't he just, you know, tell Micah Parsons, "Hey, man, show with the podcast our run defense stinks"? And it brings up an interesting question, because back in April, if you guys remember, a Dallas radio host pointed out that 4 different sources in the locker room have said they're fed up with Micah Parsons. All the success went to his head, the early numbers, the Defensive Player of the Year votes, all this stuff has gone to his head, and he's a bit of an egomaniac, according to some Dallas radio host. And I don't know about you guys, but I think back to how the Dallas Cowboys and Jerry Jones really built that dynasty in the mid-90s, and it was the Herschel Walker trade. That was the impetus that started everything in the right direction. And a lot of people think, oh, you just move on from Dak. Okay, it doesn't really solve your quarterback problem, and Dak was, oh, that's right, he was a runner-up for MVP last year. Okay, so then there's CeeDee Lamb, who's very good and, you know, obviously one of the top 5-6 receivers in the league. And then there's Micah Parsons. And I mentioned this, I don't know if it was recently or last month, but as good as Micah Parsons has been in the regular season, dude's been on a milk carton in the playoffs. Let's run the stats. I know this is not going to make Micah Parsons happy. I'm sorry. It's just the stats, Micah. But in the playoffs, you basically ghosted the Cowboys. 1 sack in 4 games, a whopping 4 quarterback hits. You're not forcing fumbles. The regular seasons have been awesome, obviously. But where is the guy in the postseason? Oh, you mean teams can scheme him out? Or they can run at him because he's not a great run defender? Oh, okay, gotcha. And now he's doing a podcast, and it's clear not everybody has the gravitas in that locker room to challenge Micah Parsons. The dude's an alpha. He's a monster on the defensive side side of the football. He goes to all like the Mavericks games. He's a big dude around everybody loves him. So who's willing to challenge him? And that's Malik Hooker, a veteran. Maybe, just maybe, Micah, Malik Hooker speaking for the locker room when he's saying, hey, man, maybe you should show with the podcast and kind of focus on, you know, our product on the field. Now, I know we could say Malik Hooker, that's out of pocket. He's recording a podcast. What is that, an hour of his time, 2 hours? Come on. Okay. But there's clearly a faction in the locker room that thinks that. I don't think Malik Hooker's gone rogue here to put this out there. Maybe Dan Quinn would talk about it if asked in Washington. I don't know. What, is anyone else capable of standing up to Micah Parsons? We know Jerry Jones ain't going to do it. He loves his homegrown guys. He don't want to get rid of CeeDee Lamb or Micah Parsons. I'm just putting it out there. There's a couple teams with a quarterback on a rookie deal who can make a move for Micah Parsons and pay him. I mean, I think the Cowboys have to be serious. If you're trading one of the big three, because you can't afford all of them if you want to keep this train rolling, I think Micah Parsons has got to be the guy. You'll get a big haul. I think Jalen Ramsey fetched 2 firsts back in the day when the Jags traded him. Why couldn't Micah Parsons fetch 2 firsts? I mean, why can't Dallas get a haul for him and quickly reset? I mean, it's much easier to find a pass rusher, is it not, than it is a quarterback? And you could say, well, Dak's not a franchise quarterback. Okay, he was runner-up for MVP, but continued to take shots at Dak Prescott. I mean, again, I showed you the Micah Parsons playoff numbers. They're not there. And it's a sample size of 4 games. I get it. Look around the league. Defensive edge rushers can be had anywhere. And you're telling me this guy, he's causing rifts in the locker room? Woohoo! Cowboys, y'all got problems. Let's go to Alex Curry with the news.
No. Turn on the news. This is the
over star power. And, you know, allegedly the Clippers were talking to the Warriors about trading Paul George there. But then it comes out that the Clippers were never serious. They're not keeping Paul George in the West. So if you take the Warriors out, and the Knicks said no, and the Orlando Magic, you know, they had the cap space, and all of a sudden they use it on KCP? Seriously, they gave him $66 million. Maybe they got wind Paul George wasn't going to pick Orlando, but Orlando didn't even make an offer to Paul George. And so essentially, Philly fell ass backwards into Paul George. That's how they ended up getting their 3rd star. It's not like there was this race for Paul George and he had to take 6 meetings because nobody has cap space. It doesn't work anymore. The math doesn't add up. And I'll end with this. And I like Paul George. He's a smooth player. He's a really nice guy. He appears by all accounts. And this is probably going to come off a little harsh, but this is just real talk, and Paul George, get ready for it. In all the big threes that we've seen that come up short, somebody is the fall guy. Somebody gets blamed. Somebody has to take a step back. Whether it's Chris Bosh with the Heatles, going from like a 24-10 guy in Toronto to, he's spotting up in the corner and he's like a 16-10 guy. Kevin Love in Cleveland. Remember what he was in Minnesota? Analytics darling. I think he was like 25-11 in Minnesota. Has stats have to come back. You're playing with LeBron. And you look at some of these big threes, somebody's got to sacrifice. And I'll ask you this, Paul George. Are you willing to sacrifice? Because I'm telling you right now, Tyrese Maxey, they love him in Philadelphia. He's a homegrown guy. He's a young talent who is big time ascending in this league. He might be on the Anthony Edwards track for all we know. He will not, Tyrese Maxey, he will not be taking a step back. Do you think Joel Embiid is going to be taking a step back? Joel Embiid, beloved in Philadelphia. Probably not on the level of Kelsey and Hurts, but they love Embiid. He's bulletproof. The guy doesn't show up in the playoffs often. Go look at what happened against the Hawks. Go look at what happened even more recently against the Celtics when they were up 3-2 and totally blew that. Embiid no-show. And he's bulletproof. He doesn't take any hits anywhere. Paul George, you're going to be the fall guy. They're going to come after you. Well, Paul George didn't defend. He couldn't defend the wings. Paul George's offense, he shot 4 of 16. Paul George, I hope you're ready for that because it's tough. They're going to blame someone. And unfortunately, Paul, it's probably going to be you. End of the Big Three era is disappointing. It had a great run. And now we usher in the 2+1 or 2 or 3. But good luck to the Sixers. I will, at some point in the next 2 days, break down what I think are the top 8 in the East. And the Sixers will barely crack my top 4. I'm telling you, watch out for Indiana. Just, Pacers are going to be spicy. So Alex Curry, I am excited for so far NBA. Free agency's been fun.
It's been like beautiful chaos. We got some big moves, but like as you were just saying, the league's kind of in the middle of a